I'm Lyra Wolf, and I'm a writer of mythic fantasy inspired by Norse mythology. And I have a new series that I'm releasing October 9th that's dark, twisted, and deliciously fun, and focuses on everyone's favorite god of mischief, Loki. So the first book that I have releasing is called Truth and Other Lies, and today I'll be reading to you chapter 1, then also another selection from a chapter later on in the book. So I'll get started. Chapter 1, Present Day, Basel, Switzerland. He stood naked on the altar, staring up at the crucifix. He said he came to destroy the world. This wasn't the first deranged man I encountered inside the Munster Cathedral, but he was the most tenacious in his ravings. When I called the police, the woman on the phone sighed. A naked man inside a church did not constitute an emergency. I strongly disagreed. She sighed again, then said an officer would arrive in 20 minutes, if one was available. I cleared my throat, wanting to alert the man of my return. He turned and met my gaze. Sharp eyes of green cut into my core, almost into my very being. I didn't know if they wanted to love me or end me. I forced myself to speak. I found this suit in the rectory. It might be a little short for someone of your height, but it should do the job. He tilted his head, his eyes trailing to the pressed suit in my hands. A wave of energy from him struck me, kicking me in the chest like a mule. Fierce, raw, alluring. He descended the red sandstone steps, each stride determined and powerful. Feline. I knew I should run, but I also inexplicably wanted to stay. Flicking back his head, he ran his elegant fingers through shoulder-length copper hair. His every muscle and movement tensed with careless danger, though his air remained at ease. He possessed a sublime and menacing beauty I'd only ever seen captured in the Lucifer of Liège. Taking the suit from me, he caressed the fabric beneath his thumbs. He smiled, a wry, devastating smile. For a heartbeat, a torrential thrill lit my blood. You people never were fond of public nudity, he said. His voice, soft, yet lethal. His every word resonated within the buttresses. Who was this man? He pushed his arms into the shirt and flicked each button into the little slits as if savoring each step, though he grumbled at the lack of gold embroidery. I checked my watch. 10 minutes more to wait. Damn, he would leave before the police arrived. For his own safety, I couldn't let that happen. I would be remiss if I didn't ask why you intend to destroy the world, I pushed out. A frown tugged at his lips, as if I'd caused him great insult. No, not the world, he said, shaking his head. All worlds, all universes. I will shatter everything. Is this suit silk? He shoved his legs into the pants and zipped the fly. I've missed the sensation of fine clothes against my skin. I didn't like the deadly flash in his eyes, the irreverent laughter behind his pupils. I rubbed the back of my neck, my fingers gliding over cold sweat. Isn't wanting such destruction extreme? I only know extreme. He smiled that smile again. Where the hell were the police? Smoothing out the creases of his suit, he glanced over his shoulder at the side vestibule. Anger hardened his lips, erasing any hint of their seemingly constant amusement. He flickered. Two overlaying images raced between each other. They flipped back and forth over and over until one beneath flashed to the surface, fierce and vivid. Pinpoint punctures surrounded his mouth. A map of scars stretched across his face, twisting in thick red lines. The marred tissue traveled down his neck, disappearing beneath his white Oxford shirt. My breath stopped. A sickening chill gripped my stomach. This couldn't be real. I blinked, hard. His beauty returned, unobscured by the horror, unobscured by anything. He was, once again, perfect. The low lighting alongside my nerves played with me. That was the explanation. It had to be. Where are they? He growled. He walked to the plain cross standing beside an open Bible. A single white candle sat to its right. He curled his hands into fists, the skin pulling white over his knuckles. Where are what? The beeswax candles, the trays of sand. His rage crashed against my chest in violent waves. Why should he be this upset over a Catholic superstition? There haven't been prayer candles in the Munster for 500 years. Not since the Reformation. You must be confused with another church, I said. His shoulders dropped. His skin paled. For the first time, he appeared fragile, fatigued. 500 years, he whispered. Pain lanced each word. He neared the candle, his footing no longer anchored. He stared at the wick, his gaze lost somewhere, someplace. I'm sure there's someone out there looking for you. Is there a phone number I can call? I wanted to divert him. It all started to unnerve me more greatly. 500 years, he yelled. I've been imprisoned in that hell for 5 centuries. The arches shook and the ground quaked. My heart pounded in my throat and a fresh crack of terror split through me. He sunk to the floor, broken, defeated. He buried his face in his hands and flickered a second time. Webs of deep scars laced between his fingers and over his hands. I blinked again and again. He returned to his nearly divine form. 20 minutes had now passed. Still no police. Pity overtook my fear, and I reached out to touch his shoulder. He might as well have been marble. For a second, I believed he was the Lucifer of Liège come to life. What's your name? Searing heat burned through his clothes and scorched into my palm. I yanked back my hand. The candlewick ignited on its own. He rose to his feet, lengthening and seeming much taller than I first recalled. The flame blazed hotter, brighter, throwing him in shades of gold. Even the red of his hair burned. But his eyes, fire, an absolute inferno exploded within them. This was no man, and the police weren't coming. My pulse thundered in my ears, and terror, cold, bitter terror, consumed me. I stepped back. He took one towards me, and another. I made to run, but I stumbled and fell into the time-worn oak pew. In a second, he was on me, as if I was his prey. He leaned over my trembling body, the heat rolling off his skin, broiling my cheeks. You have no idea who you're dealing with, mortal man, he said. I am Loki, Loki of the Aesir, Loki of the Jotun, the god of mischief, the god of lies, the trickster, the evildoer, the sly one. I am chaos. Dread pounded in every beat of my heart. My every vein went ice. But that's all a myth, I stammered. He chuckled as if I told him a hilarious joke. His eyes returned to their normal green and his skin cooled. I am no myth. Are you going to kill me? I asked. His lips pulled into a charming smile. It sickened me how much it made me want to like him despite his threats. Yes, but at another time. Please don't take it personally. I will kill you as I will kill every living creature. It's quite fair, I assure you. He held out his hand, offering to help me back to my feet. But why? I pushed myself out of the pew, refusing his help. He shrugged and let his hand fall back to his side. For the same reason your God destroyed his own creation with a flood, judgment. I shook my head and swallowed down my panic despite all reason and good sense. I would not shrink. I would not waver. I couldn't, not when everything was on the line. This isn't judgment. This is extermination. Whatever grievances were committed against you, you must forgive. The laughter in the lines of his face faded, a bleak emptiness taking root instead. You don't know what they did, he whispered the words. After what they've done, they deserve no forgiveness. He stared once more at the candle beside the open Bible, at somewhere in the past. The intensity in his gaze sent cold sweat trickling down my back. What have they done? So that's the end of chapter 1. And so after present day, we go backwards 500 years to 1526. And this next part is a selection from a chapter that takes place at a carnival in Basel, Switzerland. Loki has begrudgingly agreed to accompany Odin to this carnival. And he is caught off guard by something he catches among the crowd. Blue light skittered between the men and women who all bustled and shoved against one another to get from one side of Marktplatz to the other. I forced my way through the tide of elbows and knees, keeping my gaze firmly on the shimmering blue orb racing up the narrow street. Its radiating serenity beat against my chest, and my pulse thrashed in my ears with my rising excitement. In all my millennia of life, I encountered nearly all elements of the universe: love, war, wisdom. But I never beheld the rarest and most delicate of these forces, fidelity. I ran across the cobblestones, chasing the spheres that skipped and hopped, just a little closer to glimpse the creature who possessed it. My breath caught in my throat. Honey ginger hair fell in long wisps out of a golden threaded snood. Her blue velvet gown cinched her waist and hugged her arms. She glimpsed behind her shoulder, revealing a face of soft curves and arcs. And in her chest, bright and strong, burned the most beautiful and sincere fidelity. I tilted my head, laughing softly at the delightful impossibility that a simple human contained the most precious of elements within them. Their bodies were far too fragile to contain such raw energy, and yet, this Midgardian woman defied everything I knew. Curiosity ignited my blood further. I had to get even closer. She walked briskly towards the Rhine, her arms straining, holding onto her wicker basket. "Where are you off to in such a hurry, pretty lady?" a coarse man asked her. "Hurrying to rid myself of idiots like yourself," she replied. I like this one. She ascended the steps of an alley, the plaster houses squeezing us as I continued to follow. She exited into a street, took a sharp right, and flew down a cobbled hill. Water gushed from a small waterway beside us. A paddle wheel thumped somewhere in the distance. We were quite alone now, the bright tones of the fifes dying in the night air. A shadow spread over her. Thick fingers gripped into her skirts and pulled her back, causing her to fall. Her basket split open, striking the ground, and small metal pieces clattered across the cobblestones. "Sigyn, not so sure-footed now," he said, his voice gruff. "Go to hell, Bertolf," she spat. Pressing her palms into the stone, she pushed herself upright. I didn't like the amusement glinting in his tiny eyes. She made to pick up her basket when he kicked it away from beneath her hand. "Imbecile," she yelled. She dove for the scattering metallic pieces, but he clasped her arm in his beefy hand, preventing her. His fine silk clothes and lace were of a gentleman more than thief. "I invested money in good faith in your brother's business venture. I and several others were promised a handsome return." The creases in his pockmarked forehead deepened. "Since he left for Portugal, I have not received one blasted franc. I demand I have what he took of mine returned." "Your foolishness in believing Simon knew anything about wine or trade is not my problem," she said. His lips stretched into a sneer, and he wrenched her against him, towering over her. "It already is," he growled. "I know you're hiding Simon from me. You can either tell me where that cheater is, or we can have a very different conversation." Her element glowed bright at his words, the light in her chest even diffusing through the pores in her skin. The very idea of surrendering her brother disgusted her. I expected no less from such an energy, and I would not see it destroyed. I made to emerge from the darkness and break Bertolf's sweaty neck, but stopped. A knife flashed in Sigyn's free hand. She pressed the edge against the length of his rounded nose, the tip threatening to pierce the corner of his eye. I couldn't help but smile. She was absolutely charming. Skin and cartilage cut easily. She forced the blade deeper until his flesh almost split. "You just have to decide if you prefer having a nose or to know a woman bested you." Her element nearly blinded me from its strength, from its devotion to her brother. Bertolf shuddered, unhooking his fingers from her gown. She stepped back, keeping her knife before her. "Bitch," he said, rubbing the side of his nose. "You'll regret this. Mark me." He stepped away, withdrawing into the shadows. "Bastard," she breathed, returning her knife to the belt at her hip. She took in a deep breath, then knelt against the stone and scavenged for those curiously precious metal bits. Pity swelled in me as she retrieved 5 out of 100 small pieces from the cracks and grooves of the street. Without thought, I approached her and knelt beside her. My heart stopped as her fidelity warmed my cheeks, wrapping me in an embrace I never wanted release from. She gasped, and the light sunk back into her. She dropped her hand to her knife. I put my hands up in the air, making sure she understood I meant no harm. I only want to know if you're hurt, I asked in perfect Swiss German, an odd little language of harsh inflection set against acute lilt. Her brown eyes met mine, and I expected her to blush. All the other Midgardians I encountered always filled with carnal fascination when they saw me, but her eyes filled with something else. I believed it to be annoyance. My blood raced at this intriguing difference. Her shoulders relaxed. I'm fine, thank you, she said. She started gathering the pieces again and placed them in her broken basket. Black ink smeared her fingers, leaving dark crescent moons beneath her nails. Smudges and stains spotted her expensive bodice, and as she wiped her brow, a sheer streak of ink remained behind. I smiled again. I searched out the pieces to help, my own fingers now getting stained by ink. A small letter M protruded from the lead square. I found an R next, then an E. What odd things to fret over. What are these? I asked, inspecting the letter Y. Humans always had such inventive ways to get past their inadequacies. She clawed at another pile, dragging them in a rattling mess towards her. Typeface? For printing? How trivial. Trivial. Her cheeks flushed red and she grasped the piece away from me. These trivial letters have changed the world. Where have you been? I couldn't very well answer that. Of course, my apologies. I'm only curious what need you have with typeface at this hour. She sighed. My father owns a printing press, Johann Weber. The lettering is all set wrong. Not only that, the apprentice finally came clean that even certain characters were missing entirely. I need to get it all sorted before sunrise. I've worked too hard to get off schedule now. She squinted, shifting the piece to catch the light. I closed my eyes, savoring her energy rolling off her shoulders and legs. It took everything in me to resist reaching out and touching her wrist, to feel her pure fidelity against my skin. It seemed silly a being of chaos should be so entranced by one of true hardness, but here we were. The D is bent. It's useless now. The weariness in her voice caused distress to ruffle through me. I swallowed down this new feeling. Who was that man? I don't discuss private family matters with strangers. But let me correct this. My name is... She'd hardly believe me if I told her the truth. And if she did believe me, I'd have to put up with all those tiresome questions about divinity and what life all means. Best to avoid it entirely. Lucas, I said. My name is Lucas Slanter. She raised her right eyebrow. Sigurd Weber. See, now we are no longer strangers. She smiled, and I wished for her to smile at me always. I suppose that's true. We placed the final pieces into her basket, and she rose to her feet. I didn't want her to leave. There's a carnival going on if you haven't noticed, I said, my words wanting to stick in my throat. Let me buy you a cider or an onion pie to get your day started. She bit her lip as if considering. Turning her gaze over her shoulder, she looked out towards the lightening sky, the first streams of pink stretching beneath the stars. Sorry, I must go. I've been detained too long as it is. Let me escort you at least. Thank you for your help, Lucas, but I've walked these streets myself my entire life. I'm perfectly capable on my own. Before I could say another word, she turned on her heel and walked off, the first woman in the 9 realms to ever deny me. I combed my hot fingers through my hair. A hand clapped over my shoulder. Dark ambition iced my veins, shriveling the warmth and hope of Sigyn. Where have you been? Odin asked. And that concludes my reading.
Thank you so much. I don't know if anybody had any questions or anything, but maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the inspiration for it, how you got interested in Norse, mythology, and like what compelled you to, build an entire fictional series around it.
Well, I've always had a love of mythology ever since being a little girl. Like my mom would always read to me different mythological tales from Greece, and then of course Norse, and so it's always been part of me. And it's just, I find them very compelling. And I also was sometimes sad that there weren't really a lot of novels or series that took these stories and really like explored the characters and the depths of the characters. And so I tried just to like find different reasons for why, you know, like Loki wants to start Ragnarok, like at the end of the world, you know, like why would he want to do that? Things like that. So that's kind of like how this started. It was just asking questions of why or what if, and then also like Sigyn is traditionally his wife in the myths, and I thought, well, what if she was immortal and like you can make them into gods, like they're not born as gods, because again, in Norse myth, like they're the only gods in the pantheons that can actually die, like the Greek gods, you know, necessarily can't. So yeah, that was kind of just my inspiration, just basically filling a gap that I saw was missing as far as the series goes.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for for sharing with us, and I hope you join us for something
Yeah,
sometime in the future when we are out and about again in the world.
yeah,
So
yeah. Well, thank you so much.